TPN at technophilespodcast.com. I'm David Geisler, and this is the Technophiles Podcast. Everybody, and welcome to the Technophiles podcast. I am David Geisler here with my co-host, Jake Gill. Jake is Skyping in from California as always. Jake, how are you?
I'm doing great. David, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm well. Just a casual Tuesday afternoon here for me. Obviously the same for you. It looks like, is the weather nice over there in California right now?
It's not too bad.
Hey, I'm digging the new haircut.
It's thank you. Yeah, it's like 70. So it's actually like colder than it has been. It was like ridiculously hot this weekend.
Well, it's finally up in the 50s here in the Midwest. So that is very exciting.
You guys have been my parents have been complaining. They're like, this is ridiculous.
Because your folks are in Milwaukee, right? Isn't that right? Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Sweet. Well, Jake, So what are we talking about today? I think I know what we're talking about. Well, I kind of know what we're talking about. Maybe I'll set it up this way. I know that you were slacking me and you said, hey, why don't we, you just had seen the movie Ready Player One and I know many people have seen that film. It's doing well. And you said to me something like, can we talk a little bit about how the virtual reality is expressed in that film or in that book and compare it to some of the things that are happening in the real world right now? And I kind of had mixed emotions. I thought, yes, 100% yes. And then I got kind of scared because my girlfriend and we are planning on seeing Ready Player One together, but we haven't seen it yet because she's on a vacation in Europe right now. And I have to I really should wait until she gets back for us to see it. So I was a little nervous about like spoilers and stuff if we're going to talk too much about the film.
Well, I will do my best to not spoil too much.
So I guess in some ways I'll be the voice of the audience or the ears of the audience that have not seen this film yet. You can speak to it a little bit. And beyond that, I'm not actually sure what we're talking about.
Yeah, I guess I'm not really sure either, but I'm posing a question like, how far away from the Oasis are we? And so kind of looking at the technology in Ready Player One and kind of looking at, okay, what's it like in the movie, which takes place in 2045, and what's it like in 2018?
A lot of these movies, I did an episode with T.C. DeWitt from The Rewatchman. He guested in and we talked about Minority Report. And that one was also set like in the 2050s. And then the Blade Runner sequel is 2050s. This is like a very magical time for science fiction. Everybody jumps to 2050 basically right now. Yeah,
I feel like you need a little bit of a gap, right? To try and introduce some tech that's just doesn't seem like it's quite there yet.
Oh, but so you still might have some brick and mortar buildings that are still something that the audience can identify with.
Yeah. Although it seems like in almost all these films that we're referencing here, like things go really poorly for the human race and like it's just like not as nice anymore.
Science fiction, it's a tricky beast because it always wants to celebrate new ideas. And technically, it's supposed to explore the human condition. As I said in episode 333, it's designed to explore the human condition through these kind of larger metaphors and these ideas of things to come. But so often, this storyline just can't help but get crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
I don't even know if it gets like super crazy, but
there's one film I can think of. Frank and Robot. I'm sorry. We're getting a little.
Oh, it's okay.
There's one film I can think about called Frank and Robot, or Robot and Frank, and it's like one science fiction film that I can think of that it's a very heartwarming idea of artificial intelligence and stuff like that. But Drew Nowakowski, who used to be a guest on this show, he mentioned a few years ago, he said, yeah, well, if nothing goes wrong, where's the story? Where's the drama? Where's the excitement? Of course the robots have to go crazy in iRobot, of course because otherwise Will Smith can't, run through the highway and do the things he needs to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, Ready Player One, how did you feel about the film? You've read the book as well, I know.
Yep. So I read the book. I originally read the book probably like right around the time that it came out. Right. I don't know how it was on my radar, but I was kind of blown away by the fact that this was Ernest Cline's first novel. Mm-hmm. It was super fun, and was very excited when I heard that Spielberg would be taking. It was just like, it was one of those things where you're like, how is he going to do this? Because really, this is like a movie for. It's like, do you like anything that has to do with kind of geek culture, especially particularly like the 80s and 90s, really being kind of the focal point. But so the book was great. Pui and I actually went to go see the movie I think we saw it on like the opening week, came out on Thursday or whatever. And Friday night, date night, we're like, we're going.
Totally.
And Pui was a little hesitant at first. She's like, oh, this seems like just a movie that you're going to like and whatever. And I'm like, let's roll with it. She ended up having a great time. She had a lot of fun. I think we both left having as much fun as each other, right? And so she appreciated the story and she had fun with it. I got to geek out and kind of see the references to the stuff that was going on in the book, or just like stuff in general. It's just so many things that like we're into. So it was very fun to see those. And then... real quick,
if I may, it's like a double geek thing, too, with Ready Player One. You can geek on the technology and the metaphors to MMORPGs and other things, or the similes or whatever. But then you can also kind of geek out on all the references. You can just geek out a perfect storm.
Like, I don't know how they negotiated the licensing rights for this film, but holy moly, like everything is in there.
So one thing I can think of is, I know Spielberg, a lot of his properties obviously are referenced in the book, and that was fine for, he was able to approve a lot of those things because he's also not just the films he's directed, but there are many films that he has produced and executive produced that people may not even be aware of, that he would still have a pretty good relationship. And I can't help but think about Spielberg's kind of magic working with Who Framed Roger Rabbit back in the 90s, how he actually got Warner Brothers and Disney to agree on having characters share the screen at the same time. I mean, that was just like an impossible feat back then, and he was the guy to do it. So basically with this film,
he has done it again.
And here's the thing. So he brings all of his Steven Spielberg connections. So there's a lot of Universal and Amblin and DreamWorks connections. And he basically makes this film with Warner Brothers, I understand. And so then Warner Brothers is cool and they get to bring all their stuff over. And I really feel like things just got nuts, is what I'm going to guess.
Yeah, they did. But it wasn't like... I don't know. It never felt like it was like overkill, though, right? Like, I think they did a very good job. I will say this. When I left the film, I thought this is probably like one of the best adaptations that I've seen in a long time, from just taking a book and turning it into a movie. Like, they had to make things slightly different. Yeah. And they did a great job of it. And they moved the story forward. And like, so actually knowing that we were going to kind of talk about this, I don't know. I was a little crazy. I decided to reread the book. So I reread it like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. And it was so easy to read. I just like ripped through it. And I mean, I don't know. I wasn't taking super detailed notes or anything. But I just wanted to see kind of again, because I had planned, after I saw it, I was like, I want to go see it again in theaters. But I think it would be fun to go read the book before I do it. So Sunday night, I actually went and saw it again. Still had fun the second time. Was a little bit more critical of, not even critical necessarily, but like was looking for different things, knowing that we're going to talk about it today.
The glitter was gone just by a smidge.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Because it was the second viewing. So, but I like still had fun.
That's cool.
Came out of the theater. I was like, yeah, definitely will. I'll probably watch it again. Pui was jealous. She had to take care of Liliana.
Hey, that says something.
I was like, hey, we'll rent it when it comes out, and I could probably do number 3.
And to speak to that adaptation that you were talking about, I know that Ernest Cline was heavily involved with the adaptation to the screenplay.
Yeah, I think he was. So I was trying to pay pretty close attention on the credits, and I'm trying not to like Google everything about this thing, but I do believe that he was heavily involved in the screenplay.
Right. So much so that Steven Spielberg gave a little bit like Jurassic Park 2. Steven Spielberg planted a seed in Ernest Cline's ear about a Ready Player 2, and Cline is now writing that book. This is true.
Yeah, so I noticed that because I have a digital copy, and now it's Ready Player 1 number 1. And I don't know when that updated, but definitely hinting toward another one.
So Spielberg did the exact same thing with Michael Crichton after Jurassic Park. He was like, there could be. And then Crichton went and wrote that sequel. Crichton had never written a sequel before. And he did it because Spielberg kind of got him going on it. But anyway.
Well, thank you, Spielberg. No, I mean, this is the cool stuff. So like, we get to geek out on it, and now this is spinning off. And I mean, the movie and the book, like, without giving anything away, we do genuinely, as audience members and readers, want to know, like, what the heck happens at the end of it and beyond. So I'm excited for Ready Player 2. Ready Player
or
1.
Whatever it might be called, but yeah,
Ready
that's what
Player
it sounds
1,
like.
number 2. I don't know. Yeah. Anyways. So we're not here to speculate on the book title though. But
when it comes to real life virtual reality, the last time that you and I personally spoke about it might have been like an HTC Vive episode a season ago or something on this show. We talked a little bit, Oculus would pop up here and there a season or so ago. So I'm just guessing. I've been a little bit out of touch with virtual reality the past maybe 6 or 7 months. And that's where I leave off, is really just kind of advances with those things. And maybe some of the stuff that Google was doing by making virtual reality accessible to everyone. So that's the best I've got. And I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't have that much more because I genuinely so I don't know, looking at this and kind of just collecting some of my notes here. I was just kind of looking at like what kind of things. Well, before we kind of get into that stuff, I do feel like we should maybe set the tone for what Ready Player One is about. And I'd mentioned that it's 2045.
Sure.
So for those of you who haven't seen the movie yet, if you haven't read the book, basically, and I'm not trying to do lots of spoilers, but like the planet's kind of a hot mess, as we're talking about. Seems like whenever we jump ahead to these like 40s, 50s, like there's slums everywhere in American cities. Kind of corporations control like your life. They control your debt. Like everything is kind of intertwined into this like really junky reality. And there's not very many people that seem like they're too happy living in this world, but they get to escape. And they escape to this place called the Oasis. And it's a game that was created. And it's just like a malleable environment where you can be anything you want to be. You can go wherever you want to go. You can do whatever you want to do. And all of it is kind of around and started with this like obsession from the game creator, in the story, who just grew up like a little bit. His parents had some issues, and he was like a really geeky person who didn't interact with women very well, and probably not with just with anybody. He struggled, right? But he found his connection to the world kind of in games. And so he ended up building, this Oasis, and he had been working on a bunch of other games before that. But
so he builds his own World of Warcraft.
Yeah,
he builds his own environment and game that people can just like a Second Life, a bit like Second Life, but like World of Warcraft, that kind of thing is what I presume.
Except for this is like the most giant sandbox game ever, where there's like unlimited licensing rights.
Right.
So different worlds, it might be there's like a Tron world, and there's all these different worlds where people who are into these sorts of things can go. And so so the idea is in the book is that in the book and the film, the guy that created this world, he dies. And as his last will and testament, he says, hey, I've hidden these Easter eggs inside of this game. And the first person to find all of the Easter eggs gets all of my money and all of my like video games and like everything. And basically like they now control the Oasis. And so it becomes this huge hunt for Halliday's Easter egg. And that's kind of what the story is all about.
So Halliday does not have any kin. He doesn't have like children or anything. So in a way, how does he will away his possessions?
Right. He makes it the final
within the thing he built. Right. I can see that. The
final most grandiose game that ever existed. Right.
Sure.
And for Halliday, it's all about the games. So yeah, I mean, we're talking about these kinds of things, but when I'm looking at like this escape to the Oasis, I think the other thing that I was kind of noticing here is, and some interesting kind of things that are kind of happening in 2045 and in this book, like people, like education, our previous episode that we were talking about, like online education. Yeah. So in this film, like everyone kind of just goes to school online. Like everyone lives their entire life online. You don't really want to be in the slums and in this world, in this reality.
Even if they're not in the Oasis, does school happen in a different piece of software, or does school happen in the Oasis?
In the Oasis.
Okay. So it really is like
everything
a Second Life.
is just in the Oasis. It's like Second Life, but it's like it's basically just taking, to me, it
sounds like it's almost an operating system. Oh, I'm sorry.
It is kind of an OS, right? It's like, and it's hard to understand kind of exactly how it's set up, because it's not really like the forefront of what's going on here. But, all these corporations are trying to get control of this game. Basically, they have market share. They have everyone using around the world. And because of this Easter egg, like, everyone, especially in the beginning of the book particularly, like, it's all about the hunt to try and find the egg. But what happens is there's like so much time that passes where really nothing is going on, and life has just kind of fallen into like people are doing these things, and really you have these they call them gunters, like egg hunters, and it's like reduced down to gunters. And so these people are like, they're the holiday nerds. They love the 80s, the 90s culture. They know everything about everything. They're the trivia kings about this guy's life and everything that he loved. And, Halliday wanted you to love the things that he loved. And in order for you to kind of try and find your stuff, like, you have to be involved in that, which is great from a viewer's perspective, because like, we all kind of dig this stuff too, right?
Yes. So, I see.
Very exciting in that regard. But, if we're kind of turning this back to the things that are kind of going on in here,
let me ask you this, Jake. Let me ask you this. Do people only interface with the Oasis via virtual reality, different degrees of virtual reality setups, or do some people access it like with tablets and stuff like that? Is it
nope,
every single time? Is it putting something on your face?
Yeah, you always have to be kind of like logged in, and you're doing that via some kind of a headset. In the movie and in the books, this is like, eons beyond what we have right now. They basically, what happens is, obviously you can like spend money to get the really good tech, but it's like all retinal. So they're just taking lasers and just imprinting what you're seeing on your eyes to the point where I kind of remember, and I'm not going to quote it, but in the book, there's a distinct quote where the main kind of character that we're following, Parzival is kind of his like avatar name, but Wade Watts is the character's name. He describes reality as like feeling grainy and just not good enough, because the quality that he's seeing inside of the Oasis is just so good and so magical and so believable that he's like, I get out and like, this doesn't feel real anymore. The Oasis is more real to me.
It's just light bouncing off of things going into my eyes, not lasers going directly into my eyes. High definition lasers going directly into my eyes.
Exactly. So the interface, you interface with the Oasis. Everything is kind of through these things. But then if you have more money to spend, if you want that, the best of the best of the best equipment, then there are kind of these like haptic suits that you can wear. They have gloves that people put on so that you can like feel and interact with things. So I believe that like your basic unit would be some kind of a headset that you're putting on, and then you're wearing some kind of a glove so that you can interact with your avatar and pull items out and do things. But if you really want to get that further levels of details, then it's really like the sky's the limit as to how much money you want to spend.
It sounds like the base model. It sounds like the base model is kind of like what we know of as like the Sony PlayStation and the Vive and stuff, where you've got these two controllers that basically would be the equivalent of the gloves in this storyline, and then the helmet. And that's where it starts, it sounds like.
That's where it starts. But you can upgrade, so you can get these like extra, these better top of the line gloves. You can upgrade your rigs. And really in the movie, we didn't see too much of that, but the book focused a little bit more on like modding and building your own kind of custom units to really just extract out that much stuff, like internet access. And so like your latency and all those things are huge. People would pay more to have this direct line so that they have, because you're battling in this game. And one of the interesting things about this world, maybe unlike a lot of the video games that exist right now, where we might be playing them online and you're kind of competing, like PvP, player versus player online. When you die in a game like that, someone gets you or whatever happens, right? Yeah. Like, it's not like anything kind of goes away. Your loot still stays and whatever. But in this particular game, when you die in the Oasis, not that you're dead in real life, but like you zero out. Sure. Any items you had are gone. Any credits you had are gone. Any level you have is gone. And so you have to start over.
Actual restart. Okay.
People get obsessive about having the best of the best of the best, because that allows them to kind of compete. And so there are PvP worlds, and like, just like kind of like well, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I was going to start kind of comparing to some of the things that are kind of going on right now.
No, let's do it.
Well, just that like, they make references to things like Twitch. And it's kind of, in this world, like apparently Twitch is still there and people are having like, there's like Friday night death matches where people are like being featured. And so these people that are in the Oasis will kind of feed into live streams of people that are playing the game. And so like you have these super high level people, and just like what happens on Twitch right now, where people are watching other people who are really good at video games play video games, and they're they're enjoying that. And so people kind of have their avatars really are like the main focus. The real names are important to drive the plot forward. But like in the Oasis, it doesn't really matter who you are in real life, right? It's all about who your avatar is, and you can be anyone, right? You don't have to be if you're a man, you don't have to be a man. If you're a woman, you don't have to be a woman. You can look however you want. And that's kind of like the really kind of the fun stuff. As far as like just this, this fantastical world where you can do whatever you want. But when we're talking about the technology, like you said, David, the headset and the gloves are kind of your starter kit. And then there are things like haptic suits, which give you that like extra, a bullet feels like a punch and all these different kinds of things. So you get that, that extra leg up on your competition. But you see the other thing that we saw in the movie a lot is like omnidirectional treadmills.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, and they're really cool. Like there's a lot of that stuff going on, and you see kind of like people like warming up. So it's really interesting to see in the film how they like jump between how, like, obviously we know that the characters are in the game, but like they're in the real world too. Right. So you get to see some of these weird interactions where like things are happening in the real world, but they're the players are kind of jacked in already. So they're how are they interacting with these things? And omnidirectional treadmills were a huge thing. The other thing that I kind of noticed and it was apparent in the first viewing too, but like even more so on the second viewing, just drones for everything. They just do everything for you. And I'm like, yeah, like of all the things that I've seen in this movie, that's probably honestly the first thing we're going to get. Right. And like it opens with like a Pizza Hut drone, like dropping off a pie, and everything like that. And so, yeah, I mean, and isn't it funny how Amazon labels on them, but like they might as well have
Amazon drones. And it's funny how back in the like even films from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, whenever they need to express a futuristic environment, they'd always immediately display, little ships flying around in the background. Yeah. And back then, the magic technology was some kind of anti-gravity, blah, blah, blah. With drones, we're still using Newtonian physics that we understand with propellers. But the concept is right there and totally accurate.
Yeah. So that like... instantly you see that and you're like, oh yeah, okay, that's like the first thing to come. But I was kind of looking at some of this technology here, and I mean, well, first of all, if we back up a little bit and think about like people escaping to the Oasis.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Like, I mean, we already kind of have to a certain extent.
Oh yeah. This kind of thing. And
yes. Like, I mean, the internet is most certainly an escape for many people already. So like, the concept of a sandbox is really nothing new. I would say that right now, one of like the most kind of like the biggest sandbox game and probably one of the highest earning games ever right now is Grand Theft Auto 5, which... has this pretty insane multiplayer world that they've created, which is, kind of a Los Santos, which is like LA. And they kind of have this whole thing.
Are I'm sorry, I got a little glitch here and you cut out. Are you talking about GTA 5? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Grand Theft Auto 5. Yep. Being kind of one of the, right now, I think it speaks to the popularity and the desire for people to have this sandbox world, and especially one that is fantastical yet also mildly real, if that kind of makes sense. I mean, like, I've played quite a lot of GTA 5, and like, you get to drive your car around and like go do stuff, but like in the end, you're like, well, I'm still a guy that's like packing an RPG and a minigun and a tank and all these different, and like you can be pretty awesome. And you have all this ridiculous money, but like, you know, the fact that this game has made so much money, and so many people still play it. This game came out in like 2013, I think, at this point. So
yeah, like
there's a big demand for some kind of escape. And this idea of like massively open multiplayer environments. Education obviously being one of the things that we see, and it's less prevalent in the movie, and I kind of get it, but in the book, like the education is a huge thing. And just the fact that like basically what happens is this game, this Oasis, was created by like two people, and one of the members, him and his wife, once they became like kind of filthy rich, they made it a point to try and educate people, and they thought the best way to do that was to educate them in the Oasis. Okay. And so when you're a student, you can enroll, and you could go to normal school, but like no one does, because why would you when you can go and take you can go to the pyramids, and like you can role play all these different things, which is like, to me, is super exciting. When I was in maybe 7th and 8th grade, actually, I had this teacher, Mr. Hartman. And he this is the kind of stuff that he did. Obviously, we didn't put on our helmets or anything like that, but like we role played like things like the Boston Massacre, which was a little weird. But, as you're involved in these kinds of things, like you learn by doing, right? You're acting. And for me, at least, it like worked really well. So if I were a kid and I could go and hang out in the Oasis and go to my school, that would be pretty cool. But like, all the, so school is like free, and you get these educations, and basically like libraries are accessible. And so all that stuff is super cool. And we're seeing some of those things already in 2018. Like that is not to me an element that's like super crazy. Mm-hmm. Another thing that struck me as being like totally sane, and like everyone's like, yeah, we makes sense, is this idea that like people are paying severe amounts of digital virtual currency for like scarce objects, digital scarcity. Right. And like blockchain, Bitcoin, all these things, like it's certainly happening. Just the fact that like video gaming now is kind of like in-app purchases, like there's some degree of like pay to win, I feel like, to some extent, right? And people have no problem in 2018 spending money for things that they don't technically own.
Or things that they own inside a system that is not tangible or physical.
Right, right. And sometimes those things can accumulate in wealth. And if there's scarcity there, people are going to be paying a lot of money to collect some of these things. And like you see this in things like World of Warcraft and stuff. Like if you have to raid some dungeon to get some really cool tech, and it goes up on an auction, people are probably going to pay a lot of money for it. So to me, that was one of those things too, where like, the idea that like all of your currency is basically tied into this digital world. Yeah, totally. Just, it'll happen. I don't know how long we're going to have cash.
Cash is already fading out.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's certain places certainly where you hope you still have some cash, but like most of the time you don't need it. So, seeing those kinds of things in the movie, I just thought, we're already in 2018, like we're aligned for this.
Well, Spielberg even mentioned himself that he was excited by the script. Well, he said one thing. He said that it was a really great celebration of nostalgia, but it was also this celebration, or this intense look forward and back, basically, was what he was speaking to. And he casually said in an interview, and I'm paraphrasing him, that he felt that the look forward was a lot more real than most people are willing to accept, and something that I think so. He's certainly not making a documentary here, but he very much believes that the direction of the things that are expressed in Ready Player One are where the film is, or where the world is heading.
I think so. And that's kind of a great transition point, because I was thinking about these things, I watched the movie, read the book, was taking a little bit of notes, and so basically just yesterday and today, Sunday and yesterday. Right. I forgot. We pushed our recording back a little bit. Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah, no problem.
So I was just looking, right? and David, this is where it gets a little weird here.
Let's do it.
Now, I know you haven't seen the movie, but I think you have a fairly good grasp of like what's going on here.
Yeah.
So I just started doing a little quick scan. I wasn't trying to do any research really. I just wanted to be this an organic conversation about Ready Player One, about some of the stuff that I was noticing in there. But I was like, I'm reading some news anyways. You know, I'm looking through. Of course, tech is coming up in my feed, right? So this is what happens.
What, you throw in a couple virtual reality Google searches, a couple virtual reality AR searches.
No. I did not type anything into the search bar. This was, I'm on my phone. I opened my news app. I'm just scrolling through. Now, granted, I have my likes. So it knows the things that I like to read. And like a lot of them are Technophiles, maybe centered or focused or whatever.
Sure.
Right. But like, so here's some brief headliney things that I noticed as I was looking through the news here. All right. The first one that I thought was kind of interesting was, and I'm going to skip, you might be looking at my notes. I'm going to skip that one first. Okay. But first thing here is I was reading, and I think this came up on Twitter, and it was like Chinese youths now spend more time per day on their phone than they do watching TV.
Okay. I can
I'm like,
imagine that.
Okay, that doesn't even surprise me in the slightest.
Right.
But when we talk about this in the context of Ready Player One, where everyone is engaging with, now granted, they're not using their hand, that's pretty inefficient, but they're putting the visor on and kind of checking out from reality.
Yeah.
And like that is most certainly happening. It's not just China, right? Maybe that's where the statistic came from, but like even here, that is very much the case where like you just see people glued to their phones. Now what's interesting about China is, and not to get all language geeky here, but in China, they do have a phrase called 低头族, and that means the head down generation, because when you're looking at your phone,
heads down,
you're looking down.
Wow. The head down.
So, but it's like, it's really funny because I was actually on my way home from taking Liliana to daycare this morning, and I saw this guy leaving work, and he was like just walking across the street on his phone the entire time. Like no one hit him or anything, but I'm just sitting there like, don't you want to look up maybe just a little, like there are a lot of cars around here, man. But it's like, so clearly just from this kind of headline from, I think just our observations in general, just how the world works right now, like the idea of interfacing with some kind of technology and getting a little lost in it. Yeah, that's already happening. We don't need VR goggles for people to kind of check out. Like it happens. They're on their phones, they're on their apps, they're ignoring.
Yeah, that'll just be an evolution of the technology, literally just the technology. The ramifications are already seeded.
Right. And, obviously, I think it'll be really a lot more convenient if you can just put some goggles on and then you could free up your hands and you don't even have to use your phone anymore. But like, I don't know. I think the phone, I don't know how long we're going to have a smartphone anymore.
Well, so this is something that Alex spoke to in our Facebook Analytica episode, and he mentioned briefly, it was just kind of an offhand quick comment. It wasn't our main topic, but he was mentioning that a lot of the big tech companies right now, we were discussing a little bit, for if someone hasn't heard that episode yet, we were discussing a little bit how a social media company, they have a lifespan, and usually what happens is as they start to lose users, which Facebook is in that right now, along with other, we certainly saw it with MySpace and other social things as well, social companies as well, they start to evolve into becoming a portfolio company. They kind of just have to. They just have to become a company that just buys other companies because the main product starts to trend down. And so the business model needs to change. They were
smart with that Instagram buy.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. And that's another thing. Like I do use Instagram, but a lot of people don't remember or realize or recall that all that data is going to Facebook's servers, just like using the Facebook app and everything else. But anyway, the point I was trying to make was that when companies become portfolio companies, oh no, I just lost it.
They're just buying stuff like crazy.
Buying stuff up. And so a lot of the big companies right now, even not the social media companies, even Apple and a lot of the other bigger companies, Alex was pointing out that there's a bit of a plateau right now in development because a lot of the major companies, he was deducing, feel that the next big break in technology is about to happen, that it's probably going to be virtual reality. It's probably going to be augmented reality, something like that. The next quote unquote smartphone, the next tier is about to happen. So a lot of the big companies are becoming portfolio companies, and they're hanging on to their cash right now so that they may invest like crazy once we just tip over the edge and have virtual reality be a little bit more realistic. I know that Facebook for years has been working on a virtual reality environment similar to the PlayStation Home, perhaps similar to Oasis, for people to eventually just go on Facebook inside a virtual space. We talked about that. I think you were on that episode a year or two ago.
Yep.
And so we're seeing that trend. And that was the point I was trying to make, is that if you read the horizon right now, a lot of the companies are holding back because they're anticipating this next big jump. And that is probably speaking to the future that Ready Player One also explores.
Yeah, I think so. And I found it quite interesting that right before the start of Ready Player One, like there was a PS4 VR kit ad. I was like, of course there is, but I thought it was a little interesting. Like, I don't think we're quite there yet, and I think the largest issue is that VR kit right now, one of the largest things that would set what kind of exists right now in 2018, apart from what we see in this film, is that, okay, granted, when we get into the book, like it is still about the rig and having the computer behind it and the processing power and everything like that. But the way that it's portrayed in the movie, like, yeah, you can get your haptic suit or your treadmill that's like upgraded or whatever. But essentially, everyone just has the goggles. And if you have the goggles and the gloves, you're good. Right. And you have a Wi-Fi connection. And right now, that's what we don't have, because none of these units are really standalone yet. And I think that until they can be, it's really going to be hard, because like, how many people, unless you are the most serious gamer, you're probably not going to go out and buy a VR kit, which is going to mean that you're going to need a VR ready rig.
Yep.
And like, that's just, it's probably too much for most people to throw, like to invest in.
There, and maybe I'm going to go off the rails here for a second, and I don't want to pull us off the topic. We can come back on, but maybe maybe right now, the way that we, all of humanity, the way we're thinking about virtual reality, we're thinking about it as an analog to the world that we live in right now. And we're thinking, oh, I run along the grass in the real world. I need to run along the grass in virtual reality. And, that's going to be the biggest hurdle, is this whole omnidirectional treadmill thing. I don't see that being particularly realistic. I think it will happen. I think some people will have that.
They already exist.
Oh, no, they certainly exist. I mean, I don't think I see it happening widespread. The same way that people pull a phone out of their pocket. I don't see an omnidirectional treadmill being as common as a cell phone. Maybe, but I don't know. I think that's going to be a big barrier of entry. And so when there are virtual reality games out there. There's ones where you're flying around in a space station, or you're using like teleportation things. This is how they get around the analog of, oh, I need to walk along this space. And I'm sure that Ready Player One gets a little fast and loose with that. They kind of, once the person's wearing goggles, I'm sure the film cuts to their avatar just screaming across the field and having a great time. And they kind of get a little gray with that, I'm sure, in the film, because why get bogged down?
But they also had a couple really funny scenes in the movie where like you see people running on streets with their goggles and their gloves on. And they're like in the real world, but they're in the game. So that's more an
augmented reality experience. You know what I mean? Because that's incredibly dangerous to be in the real world. We see the people, sometimes with Sony, it's like, oh, it creates this 6 foot by 6 foot rectangle or square in your living room, and you have to make sure you push your coffee table out of the way. If you start getting out of that zone, it triggers or something like that. Yep. But my off the rails comment is maybe the future of the internet and the future of virtual reality and the future of a digital experience similar to what's being expressed as the Oasis. Maybe it won't be an analogy. Maybe it won't be an analog. Maybe it will be a completely different way to exist in three-dimensional space, something that we can't even necessarily think about yet. Maybe it is flying around in outer space or something like that. But I digress. Let's get back to where we're at right now.
It's going to be, who really knows how we're going to interface with that stuff. But I do think it is coming. Again, I think that the rig, like not even the rig, but like the goggles and things like that, like we're just not quite there yet. Which is interesting. I don't know, David, I've actually never still to this day, I believe that like I made this claim on Technophiles.
Yes.
Like 2 years ago at this point. And I still have not put on a headset.
I've had the opportunity to try out Oculus Rift Dev 1, Oculus Rift Dev 2. I, this past summer, had the opportunity to use the Sony VR rig, and I have not yet worn an HTC Vive. The Oculus Dev 1, it was like 3-4 years ago, was not cool. It was really slow. It felt like you're like in slow motion and underwater. But when I actually, Alex Sheehan of this show, he is an extended family member of mine, and we were at a family event, and he has an Oculus Rift 2 or a Dev 2 kit, and he brought it to this event and let me. This is back when he's still living in New York, but he wasn't on the show. You know, it was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
He let me play around with it, and the refresh rate and everything was fantastic. I didn't get sick at all. I really felt like I was in the space. I felt that the controllers that I was using were all pretty good. I have heard that the HTC Vive does a fantastic job with that as well, but I can't speak to that. And then this summer I used the Sony rig, and I have to confess I was very underwhelmed by it. It was really big and heavy, and the lag, just that there was a couple frame lag. I got it's the first time I got genuinely motion sick inside virtual reality, and it was not cool. I broke into a sweat. I was playing a driving game. Yep. I was playing a driving game, and I'm looking around, and it all was really super cool, and I'm looking down, and in fact, where I was playing, I actually was using a steering wheel, a physical steering wheel and everything. So this person had the whole setup, and it was super cool in theory. But halfway through the race, I literally felt nauseous and I broke out into a hot sweat. And by the time I got done, it was like all the triggers went off. And then I had to take about 10, 15 minutes just to come back. And it was because the frame rate and the refresh rate were so slow.
Sure.
So, Oculus Rift Dev 2, I'm sure what comes in the future with Oculus, the higher resolution screens that we're getting, the quicker refresh rate, I think that those kinds of things will fall away very quickly and not be an issue.
Probably.
And certainly the Sony one is the least expensive out of all four options.
Yeah.
So, that's something you can pick up for $600 or $700. It's essentially a peripheral for your gaming system. And then there's degrees of what, if you have a stronger system, the PS4, probably it does better output of
which is kind of crazy, actually, that it's like that much more. It's like a system and a half to get that extra update.
Don't quote me on this, but I think, the Sony VR is like just as expensive, if not more, as an Oculus Rift dev kit. However, there's a technicality with the Oculus Rift. You're not also buying the computer that runs it, so you do also need a pretty strong computer.
Yep.
To do it. So yeah, I mean it's cool. Just a few weeks ago, Leona and I were at an event in Madison, and I think she was Oculus Rifting. I did not recognize the HTC. Because, the Vive, what it does, the way it knows where it is it actually shoots all these little lasers out into the room and basically gets an infrared version of the room and then feels that math move around. And that's how it knows where it's moving. That is not how Oculus basically uses a bunch of accelerometers. Okay, fine. And Leona was doing great, but she was playing one of these games where she's down in a street and she's shooting at robots. And it definitely uses the teleport method where you aim and then zap to a place and zap to a place. Because that's really, at the end of the day, that's the one thing that everybody's getting wrong, in quotes, about virtual reality right now, is that we actually don't
how do you move?
Really have a clear way to move around. In fact, in some ways,
gotta get those omnidirectional
treadmills. Or, the Matrix back in the 90s solved that by just turning it into a magic wand, and you just shove this thing into your back of your head, and then it becomes like a cerebral experience where it's all in your head. There is not a physical analogy
totally happening, actually.
What's that?
No, I can see that happening.
I agree. And there are some augmented reality glasses out there right now that post Google Glass, which I also had a chance to use, and it was not impressive at all, that first run.
Right.
But now there's a couple companies. Samsung, I think, is making something where they do shoot straight back into your eye, and that apparently is working pretty well. Certain reviews are saying. So that reminded me of what you were saying.
Yeah, retinal. I mean, that's where it's got to go.
The point is that when you look at a screen in a mask, you're seeing light come off of a LED or something, and it's going into your eye, just like you're looking at normal world. Well, the reason some people get motion sickness, and the reason I got motion sickness on the Sony one, was because at a certain point, you're still aware that it's your eyes inside a case looking at a screen.
Right.
And that's where this kind of suspension of disbelief breaks down. And that's why you get a little sick. When things are shooting, theoretically speaking, straight into your eye and they're aiming it at the back of your eye is the screen.
Yeah.
That's 1-to-1 at that point. Theoretically, that should be completely immersive visually.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. So that was kind of a little tangent off of the Chinese kids using phones, but no, I mean, this is exactly it. But I think that you have hammered home the point of right now what we're missing out of all this equation, because honestly, haptic stuff is happening, David. There are people working on it. It's not great. So like, I don't know if we're going to need to wait till 2045 or whatever to get some of these things. Haptic suits, people are working on it. Mm-hmm. Drones, we certainly are working on those too. So it's going to be kind of this getting these goggles right to the point where it just laser into the brain. You don't get sick, however you want to do it. But like really all of the things that are kind of featured in Ready Player One from that regard, we're just like, we can kind of check them off. Like they're happening. Yeah. So, but for right now, if we were to kind of find some commonalities or just look at things and say, okay, what is really happening in 2018 right now? One thing that I was reading about, again, this was kind of a scan through of things that are going on. Obviously Ready Player One being popular. Some articles were talking about that. But I did see this thing where like right now, one of the things is, it's not logging online necessarily, but there are kind of like VR gaming centers that are being built now where rather than have this issue that you're talking about where you clear things out of your house, they basically build a compound that is all mapped out. Yep. And so you're running around it, but it's more AR, right? I would consider this more augmented reality.
Kind of. Like, yeah. I think VLab spoke to this.
It's hard to say, but
I think what this company does, I can't remember their name right now, but VLabs mentioned it quickly on an episode. They basically build a digital environment, a digital auditorium or maze, and then they build a physical 1-to-1 with boards and planks of that space. So you might be able to walk through a hallway and put your hands.
The
Void. That's it. They did a Ghostbusters promotional one back when that reboot movie was coming out. That's why V spoke about it.
Surprise.
So that's a way that they are able to solve that problem where you can safely run around because what you're feeling is 1-to-1 what you're seeing. Now what you're seeing, there might be more decoration and ornamentation and things. And if I remember correctly, that company even got a little gimmicky, probably in a cool way, where like if in the virtual environment you walked out of a doorway onto a balcony, they'd have a little fan blowing in the real world and they'd have like a heat lamp so you'd feel the sun in the real world. It's cool. But that is a very unique, or that's a very that is a single experience. You're not going to rebuild flats and walls and lumber and construction every time you want to interface on someone's new Facebook wall in a virtual reality world.
But in the interim, these things will probably grow in popularity and we'll see people using them and they'll serve their own purpose for providing a certain kind of experience. Mm-hmm. And eventually, probably we won't need to kind of go and build these 1-to-1 relationships.
Another one of those 1-to-ones are the virtual reality roller coasters that are very popular right now, where a roller coaster is built in the physical world. You pop on some headsets and then they can, map a completely different world into your visual space. And sometimes companies will get clever where like the lift hill, even though you're leaning back, you're feeling your G-forces push behind you. They might express that as you moving through a time warp. So you still feel the correct G-forces, but for a different reason. Right. That's another one of those 1-to-1 experiences.
Yeah. So headline scanning. One of the other things that came up, which was interesting and kind of related to all this, was military training in virtual environments, which is generated from real cities.
Oh my. Oh,
and this is apparently a thing now. So you just gather a bunch of data that is based on whatever place you might want to train in, whatever kind of city or situation. And then they have these VR kits. And these are nothing new for the military. The military has been on VR for probably longer than anybody.
Yeah.
But for them, they're getting to the point now where they have enough, the processing power is good enough that they can kind of simulate these realities. They can simulate reality, which is scary in and of itself, to do training exercises. But they kind of take it one step further, which is like the final kind of thing that I think in 2018, like 2045, like if we have like AI that is like amazing, I think we're all cool with it, because it's like, it's definitely happening in 2018. And that's what the military is doing. So they're kind of hooking this VR station up with some AR monitoring stuff for doing assessments and improvements on people. And like, that's really the biggest thing. And I don't think, like, in Ready Player One, AI was not a big thing. It was like, it's just kind of something that was like there. And in the book, it's more prominent, where you have these like smart computers that are interacting with you.
Okay.
But, or smart, things. But
AI.
like, it didn't really go in. But I think that if we're looking at 2018 right now, and it seems like, I mean, the biggest thing that's kind of happening, the companies, all the companies with money, like you said, some of the things that they are buying right now is AI, and they just buy, and everyone's going crazy.
That's true.
And so that's kind of like, that's the other piece. And I think that, we are at the point now, if we're looking at the stuff in Ready Player One and the things that it was kind of representing, again, without giving like really anything away here, but like looking at the 80s and the 90s, 70s and whatever, the movies, things like Tron or War Games or things like, it was kind of about a supercomputer going crazy and destroying humanity. And I think that we're beyond that. Like, our dialogue is not about that anymore.
Right.
Our dialogue is about like, yeah, these AIs are just going to be like, they're going to render humans obsolete. Like, they don't need to take over the world. Just be like, yeah, whatever, humans, like, you're useless to me.
It's well said. I agree.
And we're kind of, collectively, I think, like, they didn't even need to go really into that in 2045 in the Oasis, because I think that in 2018 already, like, our conversations day in and day out are like, yep, AI is coming for your job or what. And I mean, we have talked about this countless time on our episodes, but, there is kind of a shift between the 80s and the 90s and what cyberpunk was then and sci-fi was then. And now we're kind of just like, we're just okay with the fact that like we are going to be living with machines and they're integrating into our lives in some way, shape or form. Yeah. That was just another interesting thing to see, like, when we look back at the things that we kind of love that is being highlighted in this movie, like a lot of that stuff had a really grim look at what would happen when computers mess with humans or whatever. Yeah. And now we're kind of like, they're just going to like, do everything so much better than us that like we're kind of screwed anyways, but they're not going to go for total domination. They're
not going to need to. They're already making their own world. They're literally making their own world. And then that world then they'll build religions in that world and we'll be their gods and they will never understand our physical existence and it'll be all very mysterious and magical to them. But I'm just kind of making jokes right now.
Yeah. And the only other thing that kind of, in the book and in the movie that came up time and time again was this idea of like anonymity. Or kind of being, protecting your identity or things like that, online or in the real world. And, that's just something that like, it's obviously looking at some of the things that we talked about on Technophiles with the recent Facebook stuff and everything that's been kind of going on there, and hacks all the time for credit card information, usernames, passwords, all these different things. Like, I don't know. Anonymity might be really tough. It might be something, and especially if we don't have congressional support or something, that's going to be, I think, the one thing that if I were to be critical of this movie, I would say that there is never going to be a company as altruistic as this company that has basically said, yeah, you can be whoever you want to be. And like, we'll never tell anyone. I mean, I guess Apple. Like maybe Apple's kind of the closest company we have right now where they're like, yeah, we don't care what you want, government. We're not going to give it to you. I mean, they might know internally, and obviously the game would know internally too in this movie. But that was my hardest time believing, was that anonymity in 2045 could be maintained in that way. I'm like, I just don't buy it.
The reason Apple, I hear you, and I think that's an excellent point. And the closest I can say speak to that is that the reason Apple can have that kind of perspective, at least more than other companies we know of, is because their business model is very different than Facebook and Google.
Right.
Tim Cook said himself in one of those he did something in Chicago where he did a round table or a community hall thing or something. And he actually said that Apple's model is selling products to customers. And some of these other companies, I'm paraphrasing, some of these other companies, their model is selling or they sell products to users, and the other companies sell users to advertisers. And so Apple, they just want to sell expensive computers. And if part of their branding, part of their marketing is this some of this anonymity, oh man, I get tongue tied. I apologize. Then so be it. But maybe, yeah, that's maybe as close as it gets right now. Mm-hmm. I don't really know exactly what you're speaking about in the context of Ready Player One. I know that there's. Well,
I don't want to give too much away
please
here
don't.
About anything. So,
I know there's a big bad.
I just think that
there's a dude that's the big bad from Rogue One.
What's that? Oh yes,
the guy who's the general, whatever his name is in Rogue One, is kind of. I think he's the big bad in this movie. But anyway.
Yep. So yeah, Crazy. It's one of those things where when I was looking at it, I just thought, I mean, I suppose right now you can go and play like a massively multiplayer online name and you just have your username and whatever you look like. And people might make some certain assumptions about you.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So World of Warcraft, it's not entirely impossible, but
Blizzard may not care about selling you to advertisers. They might only just care about you paying for your subscription.
But in this movie, though, David.
Yeah.
The Oasis is free.
Got it. Oh, that is a model that does not work in our day and age.
Right?
I see.
We have a free video game. Obviously, like they make money off of people doing things and whatever. Like they're this company is insanely rich and that's why he has all this money. He's trying to give it away. But the idea that like people can log on for free, I'm just sitting there like
nothing's for free, as we know. Nothing's for free. And if you're not paying with money, you're paying with information with a lot of these companies. But anyway.
So of all the things in the movie, that was my one kind of like, fair enough. I don't know if in 2045 we're going to have that much anonymity. I just don't feel like I have it right now in 2018. So barring some insane change.
So Jake, what are some of your if you have like a closing? Oh, I think we just had another internet breakdown. But I was going to ask closing thoughts on this whole thing. How are you feeling about all this?
I mean, okay, if you haven't gone and seen the movie yet, like if you listen to this show, go see the movie.
I can't wait. I have to wait a week and a half before
you will be entertained. It was very fun. I think it was interesting. You know, it's one of those things where like they just did a fantastic job too of like just talking about like cinematics and special effects and stuff. Like, you know, we're talking about this fantastical world, the Oasis, and like what they portrayed of it on the screen looked amazing, you know, and video games right now look amazing. And so if we can get some of this haptic stuff in there, or maybe we don't need to or whatever, like I don't think that what they're proposing in this movie is that far off. And I think I'm with Spielberg here where, you know, we might think, oh yeah, no, it's not going to turn out this way. We'll have to see. But like, I wouldn't be surprised. Like if I'm scared that my little girl is going to just be plugged into a thing and I'm never going to talk to her.
Jake, that is a real possibility a generation from now.
So I might have to plug in too. You know what I mean? Like, hey, let's go grind together. Let's go do some quests or something.
I know what you mean.
Like, really, like I don't think it'll be interesting to see how that kind of stuff plays out. But I think that we are going to get more and more connected to this other reality and more disconnected to this current reality, especially, and not to get super political here, but like, I mean, if some of these things like climate change is going down, it's not very good. There are some bad things that are going to be happening, especially if we don't kind of take action. And if those things continue to happen more and more, people are going to want more and more of a reason to escape. And that's like, when it all comes back to it, we're talking about a really, really, really bad, like the planet is not in a good space in 2045 and people find their escape. And I genuinely think that like people already do that nowadays. They go and they find what they like. They join the chat groups they like the people that they like. They tap the like button on the things that they like, right? And they're kind of filtering these things out already. So like to me, that's not that big of a leap of people trying to escape. I think the other tech is probably going to come. Maybe not in, you're going to have your hardcore people that are going to go all the way and they're going to have the best of the best. But I also think that we will see in the future more I think that there needs to be a separation between the gear and the rig. Right. And that'll probably happen. And when that does, I think we'll probably see a lot more people wearing stuff on their head.
Yeah, I think we can sit here and nitpick the tech. I imagine that there's going to be tiers of an experience like that where some people are just driving around an avatar with their tablet. Other people are doing mouse keyboard. Other people are full virtual reality. I think that that's going to be something like that would be inevitable in something like the Oasis. But I think all of the themes that you just laid out are spot on. And who am I to say, but I agree.
Well, I look forward to, even if we don't do a show about it, like I look forward to geeking out with you about it once you see it.
I can't wait. Like I said, I have to wait a couple weeks, but we're definitely going to check it out. All right, Jake, I think we should get going here. If people want to chat with you a little bit about this, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I'm at Critical Owl on just about everything. I try and keep the username pretty consistent. So like Instagram, Twitter, stuff like that. Happy to chat.
Fantastic. People can find me.
How about yourself, David, if they want to talk to you?
Oh, they can find they can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Raptor Paint. That's the best way to do it. And people can also tweet the show at Technophiles Pod if they are so inclined. Jake, I think that's it. Let's get out of here. I'm going to see you in a couple weeks, or I think I'll see you in a couple weeks. I don't know. We might be shifting up the format a little. Maybe you'll be talking with Alex or Leona or whatever. But in a couple weeks, our audience will see you again.
Cool. Looking forward to it.
This is a good chat. This is cool, man.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, have a good day.
David.
See you later, man.
And listeners, have a good, I don't know. Have a great one.